Welcome. My name is Stephen Frost. Welcome to another online seminar, and on behalf of GIZ FABRIC Asia, I'd like to welcome you to another online seminar, the Moving the Needle, Creating the Future Together series. And today's topic, the 12th online seminar. The screen just went off for me there. Sourcing from Myanmar, a dialogue about available options. I think there's a lot of interest in what's happening in Myanmar, what options are available for companies there. The question that is routinely asked by companies sourcing from Myanmar is, what should we do? Should we stay or should we go? And if we stay, what should we do? If we go, what should we do? You know, so there's a number of discussion points there that are I think of great interest. We have two people today to talk about this, and I'll introduce them in a moment. But before we start on the seminar proper, let me just go through a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, this will be recorded, and if you are attending, if you registered, you will receive a link to the recording sometime in the next week or so. That will be online. Second, we do have some survey. We have a short survey poll that we do every session. That enables you to give us some quick feedback. It's a very short poll. It's very easy to do. That link will be put in the chat box towards the end of this session. If you could just spare 30 seconds or a minute just to quickly click on that and answer a few short questions. Also, if you have any ideas about topics that you think we should cover in upcoming events, this series will go on until March next year, at least. So we've got quite a few slots open. So if you've got ideas about topics, please let us know. And third, questions. We do have a Q&A period at the end. I will also integrate questions into the discussion if possible as they come in. Please just put your questions into the chat box. Just type them in, and if they are for a specific speaker, please just mention who it's specifically for. If it's a general question, don't worry. I'll ask both participants to answer it. Okay, that's the housekeeping out of the way. So let's get on with this. I don't think we need a history lesson on what's been happening in Myanmar in the last couple of years. Wherever you live, I'm sure the media has been covering it in some detail. And of course, if you've been sourcing from, if you're in a brand and sourcing from the country, obviously you've been following quite closely what's going on. You know, civilian government overthrown, military rule, negative consequences, obviously for the population at large, but numerous stories of human rights violations, trade union, freedom of association, working hours, health and safety, etc., violations within the garment sector. Prior to the coup, the garment sector was a source of numerous jobs. It was a large and growing sector and a significant part of the economy of Myanmar. I'm going to come back to that sometime in the questions, because I've got some interesting data on Myanmar exports over the last couple of years that does throw into question some of the things that are happening. Anyway, I'll come back to that. So without further ado, let me just introduce our two speakers. First of all, Dr. Jonas Christoffersen, an attorney, partner at Offersen Christoffersen legal law firm in Copenhagen, in Denmark. He was a member of the NCP Denmark, the National Contact Point. He'll explain a bit about that later on, as well as the executive director of the Danish Institute for Human Rights, which is Denmark's national human rights institution. So he's got a long involvement with human rights issues, not just within Denmark, but across Europe as well. He advises corporations on human rights, due diligence, and in 2021, which is the important bit for today's talk, he conducted an investigation into bestsellers due diligence in Myanmar. I think bestseller will be known to most of you on the call. Bestseller is a major player in the fashion field and based in Denmark. Our second speaker, Ms. Kangsa Aung. Kangsa is the president of the Industrial Workers Federation of Myanmar, the IWFM. She's also the treasurer of the Confederation of Trade Unions Myanmar, the CTUM. She has long experience in the industry. After high school at 16, she left to work in a garment factory to support her 7 siblings. She completed a bachelor's degree of economics by distance education, and then she She went to Thailand to work, and as a migrant worker, got involved in the trade union movement in 2007 in exile. She returned to Myanmar in 2012. Becoming a key union leader and a worker representative at the National Minimum Wage Committee and National Technical Working Group for Labour Law Reform. As president of trade union, she is now leading the strategic development of the IWFM, which is affiliated to Industrial Global Union, and she has been working on international advocacy representing CTUM and the Myanmar Labour Alliance in Europe, calling for EBA withdrawal, anything but arms withdrawal, and engaging with brands to withdraw from Myanmar. Jonas comes to us from Denmark today, but Kangsa is in Melbourne to attend the ITUC Global Trade Union Conference occurring in Australia right now. So welcome to both speakers. We thank you both very much for your time, for joining us today. I'm going to start with Jonas, because I want to go back to 2021 and look a little bit at the report that he did for bestseller. So in early 2021, Jonas, you investigated the due diligence of bestseller in Myanmar. Now, I do have a copy of that report, but I only have a copy in Danish, and I used some Google Translate. I'm not quite sure how good Google is with Danish, but I certainly got the gist of it. And bestseller used to have had some summary information online. I had a link to that before, but that's disappeared. So, can you talk a bit about the background and the context of doing this investigation? You know, why you, and perhaps you could talk a little bit about your background in human rights, and then what were the main conclusions of the report? So, you know, the background, the context, and the conclusions of the report that you did.
Yes, thank you, Steve. And let me just, as mentioned to you before we went online, just clarify my role in respect of bestseller. I'm not the current legal representative of bestseller. I haven't advised them on an ongoing basis. But when a discussion came up in Denmark in the spring of 2021 on bestseller's conduct in Myanmar, they approached me as an independent advisor, independent from them, to look into their due diligence process. Had they actually conducted a thorough due diligence in Myanmar the years they had been there? I did that and launched a report. Since then, I haven't advised them, and I don't know anything about bestseller's current affairs in Myanmar. Just to clarify that. But basically, the context, of course, was after the coup and after the introduction of EU sanctions. The UN reports said that there might have been payments from certain industrial zones, factories in certain industrial zones to the military. And after the introduction of EU sanctions, those violations, such payments would be in violations of the EU sanctions. Before
Jonas, can I just interrupt?
Yes.
Can you just briefly describe the EU sanctions, because the EU sanctions is quite specific. So could you just take us through that a bit?
Well, just the core of the sanctions are that you could not have any financial activities that would directly benefit the military. So that would also be military government persons, the military-owned companies, and so on. So the question in respect of Myanmar was they had sourced from around, at the time, around 30 different factories in Myanmar. And 3 of those factories were located in a particular industrial zone. And the allegation was made that if you sourced from that zone, you would be paying monies to a military-owned company, MEHL. So the question was, after the sanctions, if you continue to pay after the sanctions were introduced, that would violate the EU sanctions. Prior to sanctions, it wasn't per se illegal to make payments to a military-owned company, but it was undesirable to do so. So the question was, the core question was, had Bestseller conducted a sufficiently thorough due diligence in that matter, and also more generally? But the issue that gave rise to the whole concern was those payments. And we looked into the evidence of whether such payment had been made. We tried to get the evidence from the EU, the special rapporteur, and others that had investigated into the matters, and found that there was no evidence. The UN had no evidence. They had allegations about it, but they had no evidence. So our conclusion was on that issue that there was no, we call it, reasonable basis for assuming that there had been made these payments, although there was a suspicion that they might have been made. It was also then a discussion and we thought about that. All the actors involved in the field at the time knew or thought that they knew that these payments would be made or might be made. That was, it was an assumption that they might be made. But the amounts were a few $100s a month. That level, very minor amount. So the question was that amount in itself always illegal or undesirable, or could that be balanced off against other considerations? And the overall thinking, basically from, I would say, the vast majority of actors at the time was that was okay. The amount was so small and balanced off against all the other considerations, that was okay. That was the thinking at the time. And I also agree with that, that was okay. So as part of a due diligence, looking into matters, balancing things off, I found that was okay. But more importantly, our report went into basically overlooking and reviewing the totality of Bestseller's ongoing due diligence in Myanmar from the time they took up engagement in Myanmar, which I think was around 2012, 13, 14, I can't remember, way back then. So what due diligence did they do at the beginning, and how did they develop that due diligence on an ongoing basis, and what did they actually do while in Myanmar, and how did they try to conduct themselves, or how did they conduct themselves in Myanmar? And our conclusion was that they had lived up to their responsibilities just by, and we call it the highest international standards. And the reason why we use that bar and not simply an acceptable international standards just by the guiding principles, but the highest standards was that was the bar that they wanted to be assessed by. So you could have said, okay, they lived up to the bare minimum, or it was a quite okay standard, but we found that it was at the highest standards, that basically what they had done was more than the most you could expect from a company sourcing from Myanmar. That was our conclusion at the time.
You mentioned that with regard to payments or possible payments to the military, to the military company, that you talked about most actors were comfortable with the notion of $100 here or $100 there. When you say actors, who are we talking about? Who were the actors involved in discussing that issue?
It was different organizations, trade union representatives, and others actors, and some of them I can't remember the names. I haven't read up on all the names. They are in our report and in the appendices that ran over several hundred pages, and some of them didn't want to have their name disclosed. And that was one of the challenges I have to say also in doing a report like this, was that a lot of the actors that we spoke to said that they were comfortable talking to us, but they wouldn't have their name published. Some of them would also say, we will talk to you, but we don't want you to disclose our name, our identity to bestseller. And some NGOs were critical when we talked to them, some were not. But basically, what we could see from the evidence, and we got all the documentation and minutes from meetings and emails and so on from bestseller, what they had in their files. We could see that they had spoken to a wide variety of actors that basically were of the opinion in those years from 2013-14 up to 2021 that these payments were basically unavoidable. That you needed to accept some kind of minor payments, but on balance, that was okay.
And so the report was published in
May,
April or May
2021.
What was the response in Denmark or in Europe in general? I guess Denmark is more relevant, but was there was the report discussed at any level? Did people discuss it publicly?
There was a lot of media attention around bestseller before the report, including by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was quite critical. Unknowing was he that his ministry had been involved all the way along, because they were supporting some of bestseller's projects in Myanmar. So basically, his own ministry knew everything about what was going on, but he still went out and was very critical. So I think the challenge was I think that's a take home from many companies, is that basically you will not be exonerated in public debate. The newspapers didn't go out and say, oh, we're sorry, we were so critical. We now see that we weren't, but basically the debate died. And there was a public institution that was looking into these, whether they had violated the EU sanctions, and they found that they hadn't, and basically they agreed with our report. So in a way, the discussion, at least in Denmark, as I see it, died, but I don't know if what other discussions bestseller might have had afterwards. I basically left it when I stamped it.
Yeah, of course, bestseller is I suppose it's the biggest fashion seller in Denmark. I presume one of the largest companies in the country as well. So I guess a lot of media attention in the same way that H&M gets a lot of media attention in Sweden.
Yes, but I think the most important follow-up was that a member of parliament had launched a complaint with the Danish NCP, and they investigated the matter, and they came up with a decision in September 2022, so a year and a half later. They came up with a decision, and they dismissed the complaint, and they drafted an 11-page decision, which I can talk a little bit about here. Unfortunately, it's only available right now in Danish. I've heard that it will be translated by NCP Denmark, but it hasn't been translated. I just checked it on the webpage yesterday. It isn't there in English yet.
Jonas, before you tell us a bit about before you summarise the Danish report, can you just explain a little bit about what the NCP, National Contact Point Denmark, is and does?
Yes. Under the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, the OECD states can establish a national institution. It's called a national contact point, to basically work on these issues and cooperate internationally on these issues. And in Denmark, the way it has been established in Denmark is that it's an independent public institution. It's currently led by a professor at the University of Copenhagen. It has various representative members. It has 5 members, and they have been appointed by different institutions, and one of them is a so-called expert member appointed by the government. And I was the expert member when I was the director of the Danish Institute for Human Rights, the Danish National Human Rights Institution, which is the core independent human rights institution in Denmark. And what they can do is they can take complaints from anybody on any Danish company's conduct anywhere in the world on these issues. And then they can look into the matter, and they can mediate the complaint, or they can investigate into the matter and make its own decision on the issue. So it could be a trade union from Myanmar that complained to the NCP Denmark of bestsellers' conduct, and then the NCP could mediate between the trade union and the company. In this case, it was a member of parliament, so there wasn't much mediation to do there. But basically, they looked into all the evidence in the case, our report, underlying information, everything else that they could get from, to the extent that they could get it from bestseller, and then they looked at it from, and I think that's an important point, from the basis or perspective of the OECD guidelines and the UN global principles. So it's not a free political decision of what do they feel this morning that somebody should do,
right?
But it's based on this soft law legal basis on what can be expected in terms of these standards.
So you've got the report the report in your hands there. Is there anything we should know about that? Is there anything in it that you think is it's interesting for us to know?
Well, basically they and I hope it will come out shortly in English so people can read it, because it's quite interesting. And I think one of the key points I think we should keep in mind when we address these issues is you can have your own political free decision and view on what should be done. You can say, I don't care about human rights. I don't care about what's happening in any country. I'll just go and source and do whatever I want. That's one perspective. I don't care about anything. Or you could have the other position, another position at another end of the spectrum is, don't go there. If you're there, leave, no matter the consequences. But under the UN guiding principles and the OECD guidelines, the question is a different one, namely conduct an ongoing due diligence, try to see what you can do to improve the situation, blah, 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 all these issues that I think we are pretty much familiar with. And on that basis, make an informed decision and be transparent about it. And keep looking, keep reviewing your situation, keep changing what you should do, and keep considering what you should do. And that is what the NCP is doing. They were basically saying, when you are operating in a context like Myanmar, you should do an enhanced due diligence. And then they looked into bestsellers affairs and said, did they conduct an enhanced due diligence over this period of time? And the answer was yes. I can go more into the details if you like, or maybe later. And then they said, you need to be transparent about it. You need to communicate to the outside world. What have you been doing? What are you doing? What are your considerations? And so on. And it concluded that Bestseller had communicated openly about its activities in Myanmar. And then it said, but you also have to look into the future. The situation is unstable, it's volatile. There are documented widespread violations of human rights. And in that situation, you need to continuously engage with a wide variety of stockholders and basically make, and this is, I think this is quite interesting. They said it's, and I'm translating from the Danish text, it's relevant to consider whether it's possible to maintain business activities in a responsible way and thereby provide livelihood to workers, or if a continued presence in the country would lead to a greater damage on the rights of workers as well as the broader population and undermine a return to democracy. If the balance then tips to where your presence will be more damaging than your exit, then you should basically exit in a responsible way. So I think that's basically the core question at the time. Well, where we are now is, where is that tipping point?
Right.
And I think it's a difficult question in any context. In any context, and I think what the overall background of this is basically, and I think that was widely overlooked by the UN last year. What are the consequences for the population of Myanmar if the whole garment industry were to leave? Some of the numbers we had was that around 50,000 people were staffed, in fact were employed in the 30 factories from which Myanmar sourced alone. And then, of course, they didn't have 100% of the sourcing from these factories. But if you take that element of the industry out of the economy, what would happen? If you then look to other sectors, then what would happen? So I think that is the difficult situation. You might be inclined as an individual company to say, let's just get out. We can get out. It won't matter too much. But if everybody did the same, then what? On the other hand, when everybody stays, and so on. So that's the overall dilemma. Can take that dilemma out of the equation.
Right. Paul, I didn't really see the media talking about that until October in the English media. Eco Textile News, which is well known, I think, in the fashion industry, had a headline. Let me just share my screen here. Could show that's going to work. I don't know if Jonas, can you see the
Yes, yes.
Right. Okay. So this is from Eco Textile News. This is a well-known publication in the fashion industry that, as you can tell by its name, it covers sustainability within the industry. So Myanmar complaint against bestseller rejected. It talks about the MP, as Jonas mentioned, who questioned bestseller's due diligence. The National Contact Point Denmark has now published its decision rejecting Christian Duell's complaint following a year-long investigation. The other, Just Style, which is also another well-known publication within the industry that covers all aspects of the business, but also these days covers a lot on sustainability. Danish Complaints Authority, the NCP, recognises bestsellers due diligence in Myanmar and says has recognised its effort to carry out responsible production in the country. So that's just sort of two examples of trade publications in the industry that carry little stories in English on that. But I really hope the NCP Denmark does translate this into English, because the sentence or the sentences that you just translated for us on the fly, good job, by the way. The sentences that you just translated are really interesting. I think that really gets to the nub of the discussion, and I'm sure Kaing-Za has something to say about that. I'm going to get to Kaing-Za in a moment, because I think this is a good point to bring her into the discussion, because this balance between staying and leaving, and the consequences of staying versus the consequences of leaving, these are big discussions, and Kaing-Za has been at the centre of these discussions for a long time now, and certainly since the coup has been in the midst of discussions globally about what brands should or shouldn't do with regard to their sourcing in Myanmar. So, but before we get into that, Kaing-Za, I can see you've been taking notes, and I think you're ready to say some things. But before we get into that discussion, could you just start by just a brief update on what's been happening in Myanmar on the ground, in the garment sector, in the last month or so? All of us here are reading the news. We see stuff in the newspapers or the television, but I think you're much better placed to tell us what the situation looks like on the ground, specifically with garment workers. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for your patience. But yeah, a brief update on the situation right now for garment workers.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, good.
Before I talk about the situation of Myanmar, I would like to check one point with Jonas. Jonas?
Yes.
I read about this the decision. I did the Google translation and understood a little bit. But I don't want to discuss about it now, but I just want to know one thing. And in your presentation, in the report, in the decision, said that you received the documents and explanation from the bestseller, how they are doing due diligence in Myanmar. And in the days that they consult, they are also working with the stakeholders. And here I like to ask, did you check ground situation? Example, when the bestseller say they are working with stakeholders. And you talk about you meeting with the trade unions. Are they from Myanmar? If so, IWFN is the main trade union organization, which is mainly member are from garment sector. We are registered trade union federation, and we have a long relationship with the brands in the Danish government also. And we have a halfway guideline signed with some brands. So I think that IWFM is well known in Myanmar, in terms of Myanmar garment sector, by the international organization. But IWFN did not have any contact from the NCP during the investigation. So I'm really shocked to read about the decision saying that Basala is doing the due diligence in Myanmar. So, but I can share the situation in Myanmar, what is happening, and how brands, not only the bestseller, the brand can do their due diligence or not. So my question is, did you chat with the organization from the ground? And do you know about IWF fund or why? Yeah.
We were in contact with a wide variety of different sources, institutions, unions, NGOs, individuals in Myanmar when we did our. I can't remember all the names right now because I didn't look into that prior to this morning's meeting. But we were in contact with a wide variety of sources, and the independent NCP said also that I'll quote now, Bestseller's risks evaluation were based on a wide variety of sources, including its own investigation, third-party audits, self-evaluations, cooperations with suppliers and other interest groups, including multi-stakeholder initiatives and external experts, as well as information from from key local and international stakeholders. And of course, it's impossible to talk to everybody. And if your organization, your union was not one of them, maybe that was a mistake. I don't know. I can't remember exactly who was part of it. But I think the key part was that when we looked into it, we talked to a wide variety of sources, and some were positive about Bestseller's conduct, some were not so positive, some were outright critical and criticized us also doing the investigation in international media and so on. So we had a lot of information from a lot of different sources.
Yes, I just want to know, did you reach to the organization from the ground? But it is obvious NCP did not get contact with the main important organization, which is a trade unions, the federations, that register trade union federations, I mean. Okay, I can go to talk about Myanmar situation now. I think I don't need to talk too much about what is happening in Myanmar. Every USC, what is happening in Myanmar, in the UN report, at the ILO report. There are a lot of report, EDI and BHRC. They have a lot of report about Myanmar. So I want to short what is happening in Myanmar. And now every day we have killing, arrest by the military to the civilians. And since the coup happened, there were about 20 million people on the street. But now you cannot see much. You can see flash mob demonstration only. But people were oppressed very brutally, and many protesters were arrested and killed by overnight or during a day. And trade unions, we were in the front line against the coup. And on the 2nd of February, we have a meeting, confederation meeting, and we make a decision. We don't work with the military, the leadership. So we withdraw from the tripartite mechanism. And we organize the demonstration from different, we organize workers from different sectors to join the civil disobedience movement. So because of our activities, the military handed trade union leaders from the different level. And what they did to the trade union, all the trade unions the confederation leaders has arrest warrant against them. So all of them are now in hiding. Some got arrested. Some of our members got killed during the protest. And some of our member houses were burned during the attack of the military in the villages. So at the factory level, also the key trade union leaders were handed at the workplaces, at their home, even in the street. So key leaders are in hiding. We have remained some members at the factory, but they are under threat. They were told, do not give information what is happening at the factory to the trade unions. If the worker do so, the factory will call the soldier or police to arrest them. There is not only the threat, there is verbal threat. There is not only the verbal threat, they did it. Whenever workers want to speak out about the worker rights, before it's like a strike, and a soldier came to the factory and the strike finished within 1 day. And some of our members, they raised the complaint to the trade unions, and we contacted the brand. Then one of our union leaders who lost a job already, dismissed already from the factory, was threatened verbally, and also the manager with 3 guys trying to search him after we win the case. And now we have a kidnapping case also. How we can talk about this kind of kidnapping issue online? How can we raise this issue to a brand? Who will take responsible for the security of the workers who were kidnapped? And now they come back. What is their situation? How we can check? Because their phone are their phone are monitored, and their Facebook account are hacked. So also the SIM card were taken to monitor our communication. So that is what happened to trade unions leaders and trade unions member leaders from the factory level, and also federation level. Our president, citizen president, Brother Mau, his citizenship was terminated, and then my passport was nullified, and I have an arrest warrant, and I cannot go back home, go back to the country. So I'm now based in Germany, and I'm have a contact with our members. So we are keep fighting for worker rights and democracy in Myanmar. So industry zones are under martial law since 14 March last year. So that's why in the industry zone, there are many checkpoints. The soldiers can stop the workers at gunpoint whenever they want. It happened a lot. There are a lot of cases. And some labor NGOs stay now talking. Freedom Association is still possible in Myanmar. But that organization, including that organization, there are 16 organizations are announced by the military illegal organization. Sorry, my English is getting worse. I want to repeat that again. And then the military announced the 16 labor rights NGOs as an illegal organization last year in March. Some of the labor organizations who were announced as illegal, they are still talking. Right to freedom of association is possible, and collective bargaining is still possible. In the some brands, they are working with those labor rights NGO and saying they are having the discussion with the stakeholders. But IWF, not with IWF, because we are calling for the brands to leave from Myanmar. So because of the trade union leaders and oppression, because of the military present at the industry zone, and the employer taking the opportunity to exploit the workers. And now what happened to the workers? We have we don't have a full freedom of association and collective bargaining. That's why now we have wage exploitation, forced labor, and child labor also. And the worker do not have a right to get leave now, so pay or unpaid leave. And we have a case that recently now we have a case in a Adidas factory. The workers were dismissed. The workers who are on strike were dismissed, saying the factory has a regulation. Workers who do not come to work 1 day or more than 1 day lose job. So there is a clear violation of the forced labor. So there are a lot of cases like that. We have collected over 100 cases. We see a lot of brands involved, including Barcella, Asian, Indidas, the leader, a lot of brands, the big brands. And workers are still paying social security fee, but they are not getting security benefit, social security benefit. Even though worker got the injury at the workplace, the factory don't need to pay. The factory have to apply the benefit from the system, but the worker are not getting. And there are a lot of harassment to the women and verbally and physically and sexually. So pregnant women, women do not get leave in many factories now for the maternity leave, I mean. And then they do not get the cash benefit also. And many of workers become daily labor. So we don't have no job security now. Now we are talking about the responsible exit with some brands. And we are asking the brand to make sure the workers get the compensation according to their seniority when the brand leave and the factory close. But I know there are not many workers left who has the long experience with the contract with long experience, because many become daily labor. So there are a lot of violations we have collected and shared with EU and the media, sometimes brands. Yeah, that is what happened. So how we can solve those problems? The brands are saying they are doing due diligence. How they are doing? First step. When we talk about the due diligence, I learned there are 4 steps. Due diligence. And first, they have to identify and assessing accurate or potential that the enterprise may cause or contribute its own activities, which may be directly linked to its operation, products, or services by its business relationship. So brands, I understand that they were waiting for EDI, Human Rights Assessment Report. Now, EDI Assessment Report has released and clearly conclude that human rights due diligence is not possible in Myanmar. Freedom of association is not possible from Myanmar. So I think the brand now have to say they have done the assessment because they were finding out the EDI report before it. So after assessing the report, the next step, they have to do integration findings from impact assessment across relevant company processes and taking appropriate action according to its involvement in the impact. How the brand can take appropriate action. What is happening in their factories? Because there are a lot of violations, right? How they can take appropriate action. Do we have a good or effective dispute resolution mechanism in Myanmar? Don't have it. Since even before the coup, don't have a good and workable dispute resolution mechanism. That's why there were a lot of strike and we wind out the arbitration council, arbitration body, and we try to amend the law, dispute settlement law. But before we have a workable dispute resolution mechanism, we have a coup. So which mechanism the brands you are using to take appropriate action? Okay, if we don't have if any country don't have a system, how we started the cases? Before the coup, like IWFM, we collect the case, we communicate to the brand, raise the complaint, and ask them to investigate, and we try to settle cases. But now, where are the trade union? No trade union can survive at the factory level. IWFM can reach out to the brands and try to settle the case because before the coup, there are workers, there are union on the ground. We can communicate with them. We can communicate with the brands. Then we can settle the case. Now there is no union on the ground. There is no collective workforce to settle this kind of cases. So there is no mechanism. So how the brands are taking the appropriate action? Okay, if they have an appropriate action, the brand have to show us their own mechanism. The next step, they have to track the effectiveness of measurements in the process to address a vast human rights impact in order to know if they are working. If the brand show their mechanism to us, what are the measurements their system is working? How we can know? For example, I learned that Fairwell Foundation. Yeah, in the EDI report, Fairwell Foundation has a mechanism that the mechanism. What is the measurement? This mechanism is working. We have to know. And then, okay, next that brands have to show the stakeholder what they are, yeah, like Jonas explained, transparency, and communicate what they are doing, how it is working. They have to tell to the stakeholders. We don't get it. We don't see it. We hear they are working with stakeholders, but not trade unions are not included. In Myanmar, if we categorize the trade union movement, they are registered trade unions, and they are labor rights NGOs, and there are some unregistered trade unions. But unregistered trade union and labor NGO are announced as illegal organizations. How those organizations can effectively help the workers by working with the brand. if the workers, a worker work with illegal organization, worker can be arrested and can get the punishment by law. So we need to know what the brands are doing, what are the mechanisms, these mechanisms working, or they have to pay us, but they don't pay us. I think I talk a lot, but that is how I know the due diligence have to work, have to be implementing. But I don't see it is happening in Myanmar. Yeah, that is my observation.
Well, don't worry about talking a lot. That's why we invited you. I do have a question. Victor Massino has asked, according to you, Kangza, what would a responsible exit strategy look like? Before, and someone else has privately sent something asking that question too. And he says, are you not harming more by leaving? Will factory workers find another job? So let me just backtrack a little bit. This gets back to the sentence that Jonas translated from the NCP report. This balance between the benefits of staying versus the negative consequences of staying. You know, we're trying to this is what this question gets to, this balance. I suppose before you answer that question, could you talk a little bit about your position and the trade union position is that all brands should exit Myanmar and they should do it responsibly. Now we'll get to a responsible exit in a minute. How much support does that position have amongst garment workers in Myanmar? Can you speak a little bit to that? You know, like I can't do this, but you know, if I were able to go to a factory in Myanmar tomorrow and talk to workers, how many would agree? Yes, all brands should leave. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, when we talk about stakeholder, when we talk about the partner in the sector, and when we talk about social dialogue, who are we working with? The representative. If employer talk to the workers, if employer want to have a social dialogue with the workers, they have to talk to the worker representative, trade union representative. And that's why we trade unions are playing a very important role in Myanmar. So we trade union represent worker at the minimum wage committee, and we make a decision at the committee. We represent the worker and make decision for the minimum wage. And then we represent the workers at the technical working group committee. And then we're trying to have amend the labor law to have a better labor law. So trade unions are the key partner for the employers and the government. Now Myanmar don't have a government. We have a military dictatorship. So after the coup, we still represent the workers. We are the registered trade union. We are democratic organization. We have full representative of the workers. But this decision on the comprehensive economic sanction and asking the brand to leave from Myanmar, it is not coming only from CDU and IWFM. We discussed about it within Myanmar Labor Alliance first. Myanmar Labor Alliance is an organization. We work together with other trade unions and the labor NGOs who are announced illegal organizations. So majority of the labor organizations and labor NGOs are working in Myanmar Labor Alliance. So we made the decision. We need the comprehensive economic sanction because we are also part of the democracy movement in Myanmar. So in Myanmar, people are doing a campaign, no pay campaign. So people, because we don't want to give money to the military. That's why we are doing no pay campaign. So citizens do not pay water pay or electricity pay, something like that. So we believe that we need to cut the financial flow to the military. That's why inside we have different kind of campaign to cut the financial flow of the military. So for the worker groups, we made the decision, comprehensive economic sanction. And then we see the brand's contribution to the military financially. And the brand also harming the workers. They are existing, it's harming to the workers. Workers are under forced labor. Workers which are exploited. Workers are harassed. And then there are a lot of problems. They are harming the workers because brand cannot protect workers. And yeah, I want to finish this topic. And so that's why we see we ask the brand to leave from Myanmar. And then we talk to the different democratic organizations inside Myanmar, like a student, healthcare workers, and teacher, Women Alliance, Youth Alliance. So we met different organizations, democratic organization inside Myanmar, and the 183 organizations agree with the comprehensive economic sanction policy and brand to leave from Myanmar. That's why we have a joint statement calling for comprehensive economic sanction. Yes.
Understood.
Sorry.
Did you have a question?
Well, it was more of a comment on your question on this. Basically, the consequences of leaving Myanmar and also the concerns of workers on the ground. And let me just say, Kang, I totally sympathize with your points of view and the suffering of people on the ground in Myanmar. And I think this is what causes the true dilemma for everybody concerned with the situation is what is the best way forward? The UN independent mission and its expert Chris Sidoti said in March last year, it will send a very clear message to the military that may hopefully cause them to rethink their actions. That is, if everybody left, that will send a clear message. The country cannot revert to military dictatorship without enormous harm to the people of Myanmar. So basically, it was advocacy on the hands of a UN appointed expert that all companies should leave Myanmar. At the time, the assessment of the UNDP was that the amount of people in Myanmar living below the poverty rate was 25%, and it was feared that would be increased to 50% because of the pandemic at the time. So in a situation where the poverty rate will increase from 25, might increase to 50, you would have, and that was concerned by the UNDP, you would at the same time have another UN institution advocating for a withdrawal of companies from Myanmar. And when you are concerned with payments to workers, working conditions, union rights, and all that, you are in a true dilemma if you are saying at the same time, then all these companies should leave, because there will be no jobs, there will be no payment, there will be no need for basic unions if there's nothing to do, to put it a little bit crudely. Some of the numbers I mentioned earlier from Bestseller at the time was that of these 30 factories they were sourcing from, the value of the salaries to the people employed in those factories was around $130 million a year in salary. In the 3 industrial zones alone that we focused on, about 11, if you look into the numbers, say one of the factories they employed 3,900 staff, and 20% of the production or the sourcing from that company went to Bestseller. So that's 1/5 of 4,000, that's 800 people. So you can take, if you leave that factory, you basically leave 800 people unemployed. So these are the consequences, and that's why this is a tricky discussion, and I think that's why I think you're probably right in saying a lot of companies due diligence will identify the issues, and they have a very hard time doing anything about it. They can't reinstall trade unions' rights. They can't do away with some measurement of forced labor in some factories where and so on. They can't secure the right to strike and demonstrate of staff and so on. So that's the dilemma. If you had full observance and respect for human rights in any country, you wouldn't need this discussion. It's only a discussion when we have human rights violations. So I think that it's irresponsible to advocate that companies should just leave, because the consequences of that policy would be enormous to people on the ground. So that's why my argument and our clear advice to Bestseller last year was that it would be irresponsible for them not to re-engage in Myanmar. They had stopped sourcing at the time because they weren't sure about where they were, and so I think that is the dilemma. Are we ready? Are we ready to take upon us the responsibility of leaving people unemployed, without livelihood, their families too, because we can't improve human rights situation the way we want to? Or will it basically still be is Myanmar still better off with international companies sourcing from Myanmar? Is that still better on balance than if they weren't there and people didn't have the income and livelihood? I think that is the dilemma. And I don't think yet the situation is where people in Myanmar would be better off if the international world, if the outside world stopped having international relations with Myanmar. I don't think we are there, and I think we'll be a long way down the road before we get there, because the consequences are so severe.
So, thanks, Jonas. Pangzar, can I just redirect you back then to Victor Masseno's question?
Yeah.
You're calling for all brands to stop sourcing from Myanmar. Jonas has given a view, but I'd like to get to the impact on the ground. So he asked, what does a responsible exit strategy look like? So we've been hearing a lot about responsible exit from Myanmar in the last month or so. What would a responsible exit strategy look like? Because workers are going to lose their jobs, as Jonas points out. So I'm very keen to know. We've got quite a few people in the question box asking me, what does the responsible exit strategy look like?
Yeah, I will go to the responsible exit first, then I can respond to Jonas. And responsible exit mean we are working on it based on national law and the OECD guideline and the FOA guideline. And for us, the main point is that when responsibly to leave from Myanmar, the brand make sure they are what if they leave from Myanmar, if the factory have to close, they have the factory have to do according to Myanmar law. For example, informing to the workers 1 month before, and then give a compensation to the worker according to the law, and also pay everything worker has done for work. And also, if there are problem, dispute happen, the brands work together with the trade union to settle the case. And then they have to take responsibility, or the worker get all the compensation. And we also think about that even the brands leave, they are supplying a factory where might continue in Myanmar, and they will keep violating the worker rights. So we are asking the brand to open the communication channel with their supplier, because if we see the dispute violation in their supplier factory in Myanmar, we will reach out to the brand. We want the brand to talk with the supplier. We believe that brand have to work with only ethical employer, supplier in everywhere in the world. The brand cannot, it's not appropriate. Brands say we work with the supplier who are working in other country. They are doing good, but violating in Myanmar. So no, that should not be happen. That's why we are asking the brand to open the channel, communication channel, to talk about Myanmar with their supplier after they left. So something like that. And also we are asking the brand to contribute for their workers who will lose job after they left. So that is ongoing discussion. So I hope there are many other points, but the concept is the main concept is I explained, and then there are many technical points were put in the document. So I think responsible exist document will be public very soon. And Jonas, we are talking about the human rights due diligence, OECD guideline, UN general principle, but we are talking about the environment. So if we talk about the general principle, HRDD, I explained there are 4 steps we have to do due diligence. Are we done already or not? We have to check. But the brands, now you are saying about the environment. Yes, I like to respond about this also. So job, yeah, there will be job loss after the brand left. We take the decision very hardly. It is very painful, you know. You are talking about job, but we see now we don't have job in the garment sector. We are under slavery, modern slavery. Workers are feeling like they are working in hell. There are many workers talking like that, because workers are starving while they are working, because they are earning less than $2 per day. $2 per day is not 8 working hours. We have many evidence. The factory pay only the minimum wage less than $2 per day, but they are asking to do overtime to meet the higher target, because they are setting higher target for the minimum wage. So workers do not reach the target, so they have to work overtime because they don't want to lose job. Daily labor, they became daily labor. What does it mean? Workers cannot raise their voice. And then if they ask the question, make the question, they are told not to come next day. So that is what happened in the sector. And then we are talking about like 150,000 workers from the government sector might lose job in the future after the brand left. But what happened now? 400,000 government employees are losing job. And the whole country, according to ILO report, we have 1.2 million people losing job. And farmers across the country, we have struggle battle between the ethnic group and the military, PDF and the military. There are many places are in conflict, and the farmers cannot go back to their farm. They cannot grow, many of farmers. So we have to think about how we will solve the problem. So the root cause, having all these job loss, millions of job loss have been because of the military coup and the operation. So brands, I don't believe they are worried about the employment, because brand left when they think they want to leave. They don't think about the workers' employment.
Jonas, you have a question.
But I think this is the dilemma. I think you're raising a wide variety of questions. It's an independent question if people are not paid enough and not paying overtime and not paid for their work. So that's an issue which is of course unacceptable. And any company sourcing from Myanmar should do everything it can to make sure that when they're sourcing from a factory, these things do not take place in their factories. That's what the due diligence is about. Then if I understand you correctly, are also at the same time saying it's a problem that you have a job loss because companies are leaving, and you're advocating companies to leave, and you're being asked, what does a responsible exit strategy mean? And your answer was, if I understood it correctly, you should make sure that you pay staff before you leave. I'll give an example. We have a discussion in Denmark when the Ukraine-Russia war, should the Danish companies move out of Russia? Most companies said yes. Some of them decided to close down their shops in Russia and keep staff on the payroll. So
that's why we are asking. That's why we are asking to
that's a way
you
of doing it. You're still then putting money into Myanmar and all that. But the question is basically, you might have a few companies that would be willing to do that. You might not. But I think that if I were to advise a company on a responsible exit strategy, I would basically ask them to say, okay, what do you think will happen if you leave? Then you're saying open communication sources with their factories. I mean, talk about what if you're not sourcing there anymore? I think it's the big question is, and I haven't heard you address it, is what would happen to Myanmar? The people you're saying they're starving because they're underpaid. If they're not paid at all, what would happen to them? And I think that is the true dilemma. The true dilemma is what will happen to all your members and a lot of other people in Myanmar if there are no jobs because if the whole garment industry were to leave Myanmar. And if you don't have a good answer to that question, I think it's challenging to figure out how that could be the best solution is just to leave.
I can answer the question. Yeah. We make a decision brand to leave. We will suffer short time, because we believe the brand leave from Myanmar is one of the indicator. Also, the EU governments recognize the violation of the human rights and the war crime against humanity, war crime in Myanmar. Because now we see EU also supporting the military indirectly. Why I'm saying that? EU stay doing the development program in Myanmar, and the EU state doing responsible business conduct program in Myanmar, which is oppress the workers, exploiting the workers, but contributing to the military. People talking about the revenues go to military is very little. No, you cannot see the amount. I have a letter from a factory they received from the industry zone committee asking them to pay $1,000 per factory in the industry zone, saying they need to buy the security facility, this and that. Can the factory say no? How many factory in an industry zone? 100 of the factory. $1,000 per factory. It is just one time. We can have a letter. We don't know how many times they were asked to pay. If you want to see the evidence, the factory pay or not, how you can get that kind of evidence? If a organization decide, oh, we don't see the factory pay this 1,000, that is not appropriate. That okay. Back to the answer. We believe that after Brand left, there will be more sanctions will come on Myanmar, and we democratic organization will be supported. Now, democratic organization, including trade unions and workers, we don't have any support from the EU and other countries. But military is getting recognition from the brands and the embassies and the UN agency and the NGOs. You are doing the Myanmar people life to stay under military dictatorship for many more years, many more decades, maybe 100 decades. We don't want it. We women workers don't want to work with less than $2 for many more decades. That's why we choose to suffer short time. And after all the business left, we will put more pressure, and then inside our people are fighting back the military. We are hardly find funding for the survivor and to fight the military, but military is getting the funding easily, different way, because you are supporting them. So after we made decision, 183 organizations made the decision calling for comprehensive economic sanction, because we believe we do have state opportunity to remove the military in short time after sanction complete. And combining our resistance in Myanmar, then we will bring back the democracy, then we will bring back the better future life of our people in Myanmar. That is our vision. We are not only think about the government workers.
Okay, we're getting towards the end here. I'll just ask the GIZ IT people just to put the survey poll in into the chat box. Okay, the little link. But if you want to leave any feedback for us. I would like to go on with this discussion, but I can see we're running out of time. Many of the comments in the chat box, both privately and public, really do cover really do sort of focus on this discussion that we've been having. What are the consequences for workers? You know, M&S, Marks and Spencer, it will stop sourcing from Myanmar. It's one of 4 or 5 brands, CNA, Primark, etc. Have either stopped or have said they'll stop. Marks and Spencer say they will withdraw by March next year. Already we're seeing layoffs as a consequence of that, and I think this discussion of you know, many people are sort of interested in this is what alternatives do workers have? Yeah, where do they go? etc., is something that we need to keep on discussing. Pangzar, I've got one question. So look, if you've asked a question in the chat box, we haven't specifically got to it. I hope that the discussion that we've had has sort of touched on it at least, but there is one question that has not been touched on, and that's from TZ, or TZ as the Americans would say. How many garment workers does IWFM represent before February last year and after February last year? And how is that number, what is that percentage in terms of the total garment workers? So how many workers do you represent? How many workers belong to the union?
Thank you for this question. And I can answer, but then not by the percentage. I can answer that about the representative. Because in Myanmar, we have the 23 million people workforce, let's say. And we represent at the national tripartite. We have only 65,000 membership. We make decision for the better life of the workers because we organize and we listen from we listen voice from the workers, and we discuss with the relevant stakeholders, and we make better pay, better working condition, better benefit for the workers. So workers from Myanmar enjoy what we have done for. And the international organization where government were recognized as a worker representative, as the voice of the workers. But why now it is matter how many number of the workers we have as a member to make this decision? I think that is answer your question.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks to TZ for asking that. I see that Betget is asking, well, now we're getting lots of questions, okay, with 2 minutes to go. Brands about it, blah, 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 okay, there's some of those are statements and questions, but I will just finish with one thing. I just want to share. I just want to share my screen very briefly and with this. Prior to the election of the civilian government, there was a sanctions regime against Myanmar, and this is from Sheng Liu. I think some of you will know of Professor Liu. He's at the University of Delaware in the US. I think I've got that right. Myanmar's apparel exports up until August, well, actually up until May 2022. I just want to share this with you. I'm looking at, I'm looking at this table here, Myanmar's market share. So if you look at the importers, so Myanmar is exporting to the US, EU, and Japan. They're also exporting to other places, but Sheng Liu is just showing us these. And you can see from 2019 to 2022, US has actually increased 0.1%. EU gone down from 2.8 to 2.4%. Japan has remained the same. Now, Sheng Liu makes a comment about this. He says, while Myanmar's apparel export has suffered a notable decline in 2021, it has somehow bounced back in 2022. And one of the reasons that it has bounced back is that Myanmar is now exporting to places that they hadn't previously exported a great deal to. So they're diversifying the export market into Southeast Asia, into the ASEAN countries. I will put this into the chat box if anyone's interested in that. I know that's we need to go for another 90 minutes. I think this whole situation is extraordinarily complicated, and I'm going to have to leave it here. And I'm sorry to pick. This is a lot of chat in the chat box. Just looking. There's kind of a conversation going on between various people there, I think. It only remains for me to say thank you very much to Jonas and Kangza. Great discussion. I feel we should have had another 60 minutes at least on this, so there's a lesson there for me. Maybe we revisit this at some point, because I know that right now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this seminar, Industrial Global Union last month into this month have started a serious call for brands to exit, and to exit responsibly. So we do have now Global Trade Union making a firm statement on that. We've got Kangza and other unions and other stakeholders in Myanmar asking for this, but the question still remains, I think, on what happens with that exit, and can it be responsible enough to deal with the consequences of a mass exit? And is a mass exit even possible? If the 70 or so brands that do source from Myanmar, how many would leave? Remember, we've got Japan in the mix. Honey's Holdings is increasing its investment in Myanmar because of low wages. They're building their third factory. And we've got other markets willing to purchase products. So we're in a sense going back to that sort of pre-2011 sanctions regime, where every time a Western company pulled out of Myanmar, a Chinese company filled the vacuum. Yeah. Oh, we've got well over time. Look, thank you very much again to Jonas, to Kangza. Thank you everyone to your questions. It's a really interesting discussion, and I'm very sorry to have stopped it there. So just on behalf of GIZ Fabric, may I thank everyone for attending, and stay safe and stay well. Thank you.